one of the best quotes I heard from a mentor of mine. It was that even free things need to be sold. And I'm like, man, it really sinks it in, is because, every time you're talking to someone, you have to understand that it has to be like mutually beneficial, right? It's not just like what you're bringing to the table. It's also the other side of the table is, what do they need? What are they looking for to tell their own story, to build their own story? Everybody's trying to go somewhere. So whenever you're building a business, like you're saying, it's good to see both sides of that. Like not only what you're offering, but the people that you're partnering with, like what are they looking for as well?
100%. I made the same mistakes when I first started. I knew my vision and I just, oh, go. You want this. And they're like, no, man, that's not our business model. Shut
Right.
up. Here's your business model. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
quickly you realize, no. You have to look at it from their perspective first. Then you're secondary to them at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
Yep. That's a great way to look at it.
Well, thank you for jumping on here. So, Jerry, tell us a little bit about your background. Take us back at the start. What was the start of your entrepreneurial journey, and where are you now, and where you want to go? Give us a little background.
Yeah. How much time do you have? I'm just kidding. So, it's really crazy. I've had a really long journey, but not in a bad way. I've learned over time to really appreciate the journey, and also that sometimes things you've done in your past that don't seem connected to your future actually are some of the big building blocks, but you don't know it at the time. So just keep kind of pushing forward. So me, I started out traditionally, like a lot of entrepreneurs, in kind of the more traditional 9-to-5 world. I did some web development for a while. I worked for the government for a little bit, and I just always kind of felt in a box. So I wanted to do stuff my own. And this is going back like 20 years at this point. But, so I started freelancing, doing website development by myself for clients, small businesses of all different sizes and shapes. And that was cool. But it's just like, instead of working for one person, you work for 20, so it's just like, that's kind of the entry level into entrepreneurship that a lot of people take. So my next thing was like, I wanted to build a product. So me and a buddy of mine ended up crowdfunding a watch company called Viera Watches, and we started on Indiegogo. Worked with our friends to get the first round of people excited about it, and we ended up raising about $30,000 on Indiegogo to launch our watch company, and that was really fun, really exciting. I got to feel like creating a product for people, and how do you create a desire for a product. And so that was really exciting, a lot different than web developing and pushing around pixels. It was a little more exciting to do something of that nature. But then going down that road, it got me to understand what products want. So you could offer a product to a consumer, but as a product, what are you looking for? So that, I think, naturally gave me that insight as to like what a business is looking for when you're partnering with them, because I've been on the business side, right? So fast forward through that, watch company went great. And we ended up selling that off to another watch company that kind of wanted a smaller brand, because my business partner, he was looking to do other stuff. I was kind of looking to do other stuff. So we ended up selling the watch company, which was great. Got a little payoff on that. So up next, I did some business with my friends and started a hospitality company. So we ended up opening a food truck, a restaurant, and a meal prep company in Corpus Christi, Texas. So that was really exciting. Got to work with some friends again. The food truck was called Munchies, so it had a little hip vibe to it, so that was really good. Really into music as well. So our restaurant bar was a music venue. So we got to do that. And through that is when I got my first kind of taste into sponsorship, because we started getting businesses to sponsor different events that we threw. We threw like music festivals. We threw like different things to really involve the music industry in the city. So that got my first taste of working with sponsors, the typical banner placements, ad placements in the restaurant. So I was like, man, that's really cool that you could have something that you're offering that you like, but then another business would want to partner with you because what you're doing is cool and it gives them visibility. So I'm like, man, that's exciting. So that kind of really got my feet wet in the idea of partnerships and sponsorships. Fast forward again, the music area took me to, over COVID, we had some time to it was hospitality business. So we slowed down a little bit with COVID because people couldn't really go out. And the music industry was really affected by that because concerts, people are there. When people can't do concerts, what do? You know? So for us, that really shined a light. So we started a nonprofit to help musicians out. And that's when I really dove into sponsorship. That's when I started doing outreach to different places that weren't just local, but larger brands, and seeing what the larger brands are looking for in efforts to really provide additional resources for the musician community. And that's what really, really got me into sponsorship.
That's very cool. So you've been around the block, you've seen all sides of it, which is, I think, a good thing to be able to do. You know, I come from a world where everyone's sort of, I don't know, and tell me if what your thoughts are on this. My parents always thought, Greg, go get a 9-to-5 job. They used to, this is no joke, they would slide job posted notes and like this thing that under my door, you know, and then they quickly scurry away. And I'm like, oh, I'm not doing this. I got to do something that I actually like. But I started with, you know, that kind of doing dead end jobs sort of thing, as you would call them. But they always thought of it like, you know, entrepreneurship wasn't even a target. Like it wasn't even a thing that you would do. You wake up, and this is again using 70s, 80s sort of mentality, right? And I love my parents, obviously, and all the adults around me as a kid. They were very supportive, the best you could ever ask for, especially for an orphan kid like me that, you know, just kind of plopped into Canada randomly, not speaking English, and all of a sudden I had a great home life that was very supportive, right? So no against that, but you could know that their mentality was entrepreneurship and jumping from a watch company to then a food truck company to all this and that, and trying to sell them and do that. Oh, this is way too much scatterbrain. You know, they want one thing. You're going to work at this company forever. I've seen this shift now where we're seeing that entrepreneurship is cool. It's like hip. It's like you should be doing it. And if you're not taking control of your own life and deciding how you make money, essentially, then you're almost missing the boat. And I see the industry that we're dealing with now, these flipper kids out there, they're thinking the same way. Have you seen a similar sort of shift over the last 20, 30 years into pro entrepreneurship, maybe?
100%, and that's a great insight by you. Like when I first was in the 9-to-5 arena, and I always like had that itch to do something different and bigger. And my parents were the same way. Like I'll never forget when I had my worked for the government. Like that was like the pinnacle. They're like, you can never get fired. You're gonna keep, you know, like you just work for the government. You're just gonna keep making a bunch of money, and you won. And then to me, I just was like, this is the most boring thing that I've ever done. Like it was easy. It was good. It was easy. It was good money. But I was just like, I'll never forget like how shocked they were when I was like, you know, I just don't really want to do this anymore. They were just like, we don't understand. You've made it. You know, you this is the best job. Like, why would you not want to do it? And then I think over time they kind of like understand, or they either understand or they just gave up. You know, either way, you know, same result. So they're just like, you know, he's just gonna do what he's gonna do. So, but over time, I think it's like with the advent of technology, how fast things move, and the accessibility of business is, I think, larger than ever. And I think that plays a huge role. And, you know, with social media, like when I was started college, social media wasn't a thing, but it became more and more of a thing. And now, like I think kids used to want to be like, oh, like I want to be a movie star, or I want to be like an NBA, or I want to be like a doctor or something like that 20 years ago. And now if you ask kids, the young kids, what they want to be, they're like, I want to be a YouTuber. Like that's like the goal. So you could really tell the shift in the narrative. And you, like before, it's like you could tell kids, don't play video games, they'll rot your brain. I have a buddy that quit working for the government to play video games on Twitch full time, and he makes over $100,000 a year doing it. Like it's different now. It's completely different. The opportunities are different. You can make money doing things that you love just by sharing it with the community. Like that has never been a real thing before in the world. So now that that's a thing, it makes sense that kids switch the narrative, that they're like, I don't want to sit and work 8 hours at a job that will only pay me, you know, $45,000 a year. And if I do a really great job, they'll give me more work. And if I do a really, really great job, they'll give me a 3% raise at the end of the year. And then I'll make, you know, $51,000 a year. Like, why would anybody be excited about that when they could sit there and unbox Legos because they love Legos and make the same, if not more money just by being dedicated to their craft. Like, it's just a different world right now. And I think that the kids are seeing that because they're growing up in that world. Like, people that are a little bit older, like us, we didn't necessarily grow up in that world, but they're being surrounded by it. They're seeing success stories all the time and being like, maybe I could be that success story. And they can be, you know?
They definitely can. And I think you hit on a lot of really good points. Technology is opening up the world where you, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, you just didn't have that lens to be able to see that these things were even possible. So now everyone's seeing it. I think there's a bit of a catch-22, though. If you go a little too far on that end of the spectrum, now you're seeing a little too much of everybody, and that scares people a little bit. But we'll stay away from that more psychological aspect. We'll have to get you on another podcast to talk about that, the downside maybe. But the fact that everything's open, you can now invent your own job. You can invent your reason for being here, where in the 60s, 70s, 80s, it was, okay, here's 10 options. Which one do you want, Johnny? Pick the best out of the least favorite option or whatever, and that was what it was. So there was nothing beyond it. So you couldn't even dream bigger. Now they're seeing that, oh my God, I can do a YouTube channel. I can be esports. I can do this. I can do that. I can invent stuff. And, I can just tell a story that I personally like, and I will find customers through one of these mechanisms, kind of thing. Right. And I think this is a good thing. I think it gets a lot of kids, though, they don't realize how much work it goes behind that, right? They see the vision, they see Mr. Beast with 400 million views and all this sort of stuff, but they don't see that, okay, yeah, but Mr. Beast started actually 10 years before you saw his first video, thinking about this mentally and then going through this step and that step and then getting burned this way. And there's a great documentary about it on YouTube, actually, or was it Netflix? I can't remember. But, if you actually saw this side, I would like to see the kids focus on that side, or the youth of today see, how much work does it take? Everyone has a vision. Well, why don't the world just be better? Okay, yeah, everyone can do this. But do you know how you're going to actually make it that way? And I still think that there's a bit of that gap, right? Seeing Mr. Beast and knowing how Mr. Beast became Mr. Beast, that's a bit of still a stepping stone, I would say. So I would like to be able to see the kids nowadays be able to have more resources in tandem with the finish lines that are all over. Oh my God, millions of dollars. Well, how are you going to get there, Johnny, realistically using, like when you're talking about, well, how do I put myself in the other person's shoes? How do I sell this? You know what I mean? And you're obviously a sales guy. You've been out there hustling and selling. What are some of the things maybe you learned about actually physically building the business, compared to just the dream of, a great watch company? Well, what did it take to go start? Like, maybe we can walk through the watch company as a little case study. When it started, how long did it go? How much did you raise? 30,000. How much did you sell for? If you're allowed to say, what's a case study here look like? What did you learn through this process? And like that, let's if it's okay with you, let's take the watch company as a case study.
So just to go back and touch on a couple points that you made there, I think like one of the good things about the internet is the removal of geographic limitations, right? So I think that's why it's great, because even if you have a very niche idea, you can find other people that also like that, and you don't have to be surrounded by just your ideal community. You can find it online. So I think that's a good thing. Also, you have to remember that community is a thing, right? So whenever you want to grow anything, you need a community to help grow that thing. You need people that are interested in the same thing. So those are two steps. So then now let's go on the use case journey. Is like, one, have a big dream, because the big dream is the thing that's going to drive you. But understand that anything that you want will take work. And I like to tell myself and others, if you're not going to be interested in doing this in 5 to 10 years, then don't do it. Like, if you're like, okay, well, I'm going to do this thing for a year, and then I'm going to be famous, and then I'm going to, like, you might not actually like it enough to actually be successful. If you like it enough to do it for free, especially, then you're fine, because you're not going to be looking for instant results and instant rewards. And so to talk a little bit about the downside of the internet, I think that it's kind of rewired a lot of people's brains for instant gratification. So it's like the pluses and minuses, right? With that expansive community, with that expansive opportunity to share your story around the world, people who are kind of addicted to social media, scrolling, watching all that stuff, like, that's slowly rewiring your brain to want it now. want it now. So that's kind of why people are a little more wired to think that things are faster than they are, because the internet works really quickly, right? It's like, oh, if I want to have attention, I can just go here and get my little dopamine hit. And people have to understand that that's what they're working in, and understand that anybody great, anybody you think is an overnight success, was working 10 years in silence before they became an overnight success. And that's the reality of pretty much anything you do. Maybe you'll be faster. Congratulations, you are faster. But if you're not willing to work that 10 years in silence and hone your craft and get good and develop over time, then you really shouldn't really do it at all. Now, to use the watch company, I knew none of that. When I knew none of that when I started. We had no idea what we were doing. Literally, I was like working for the government. I had saved up some money and I was bored and I wanted to do something else. So I posted on Facebook. I was like, hey, is anybody interested in starting a business with me? Like, I want to do something else, literally. And one of my friends slash fraternity brothers, he's like, I've always wanted to start a watch company. Let's do that. Let's figure out how to do it. I'm like, and I'm really big on challenges. I love challenges. I love puzzles. I love figuring things out. And I think those are great qualities for anybody who's trying to start a business. Enjoy the challenge of it. Enjoy solving things that you don't know how to do, because you will run into a million of them, and really be excited by the challenge. Not like, oh man, this is hard. Like, I don't want to do it anymore. Not get a job, get a day job. That's, if you don't like challenges, get a day job. Seriously. But so I was like, okay, well, let's figure out how to do it. So I just started looking stuff up online, Googling, how do you start a watch company? Okay, you have to get a manufacturer. You have to figure out product. You have to figure out all this stuff. And so we were like, okay, cool. I was like, I found out how to do it, that you can, get manufacturers that have like templates of products. You can customize them with molds and stuff like that. So we ordered a batch of watches. We got about, I think, like 2,000 watches made. We got them sent over. So we had all these watches. We're like, okay, we have a watch company. We have all this product. Yes. Now what? How do we get people to buy them? Because we didn't know what we were doing. So like, okay, well, let's promote. And through promoting, we promoted through some ads. We promoted to friends. We promoted, and through that process, we got a couple people to buy our watches. And this is before the crowdfunding campaign. We got a couple of people to buy our watches, but we kind of realized over time that we were just a knockoff of another watch, kind of. It wasn't great. It wasn't that original. And we were like, okay, there has to be a better way to do this. So started researching. And this is when Indiegogo and Kickstarter were really kind of bubbling up and being more of a mainstream thing, crowdfunding a campaign. So I ended up buying a course. It was the first course I ever bought, because I was always like, oh, I don't need a course. I'll just figure it out myself. So I bought a course, and I'm a huge advocate of courses. You kind of have to be careful. You have to make sure the person you're buying it from has done what you're trying to do, and they're not just selling you steak oil, because these days courses are kind of overdone. Everybody has a course about everything. But back in the day, it was kind of new and original. But I took this course, and he taught you how to build community around the idea you're crowdfunding. So again, took some money. I ran some ads on the idea of creating a new style of watch, and it was going to be like the best watch ever made under $60. So that gives you a little insight. You need a hook. Like, why do people care? Why do people want the product that you're selling? And you have to have kind of a tag. Like, what is this? A short little catchphrase or a short little synopsis of why this is great. So what we did with that, we ran that ad to see if people would be interested in a watch like this. And this is before we even made the new watch. We were like, oh, let's see. So then we ran it, and we saw people were like, we had a button like, do you want to be notified when this watch is released? And then we ran ads, and people were like, yes, we want to know. Yes, we want to know. Yeah, we're like, okay, we're on to something now. So that's getting the proof of concept done before you spend however much money on the watch, right? Because if you have a product that nobody wants to buy, you're going to go out of money and out of business. So it's really good to know that people want the thing you're offering. So we structured it. We knew people wanted it. And then that's when we created the product. We got samples made. And that's when we ran the Indiegogo, because we already knew people wanted the product. And then we launched that to the email list we developed over time by running the ads. So that was the short version of the start of the launch of the program of the watch company.
Very cool. Very cool. I like the idea that where it's you're figuring out as you go. There isn't just, here's a recipe and it works for everybody, copy and paste, and the idea of puzzles, And it's funny, I used to always say, oh, the problem here. Oh no, okay, don't say problem, say the word puzzle. And I had to kind of get myself into this sort of thing. No, Greg, it's a puzzle. It's a puzzle. And you kind of really get into that, and life is a giant puzzle, and it's just putting the bricks in the different places and figuring out what works, testing this, testing that, and that's what we had to do essentially for the Freestyle Trampoline Association, right? A lot of people mistakenly thought that our journey was really any different than your journey. We came out, we had an idea like, okay, Olympic trampoline sucks. Let's build a better version of it. That's literally what it started off at, right? And Larry Nazar's going all over the place with all this garbage, all these things, all these reasons why we don't want to be there. But it didn't mean that we had the answer. We just had an idea of what we wanted, and then we had to figure it out. And we went from one event to another event, talked to one parent, to the next parent, to the kid, to athlete, boom, boom, boom. And we did that from 2017, the first event, all the way to 2020. That's 3 years of R&D, right? That's like a university degree almost, just in figuring out what the opportunity really was. And this is why we kept the FTA very closed. We're being very open now about it, but we didn't know any of this stuff back in the day. And if anyone thought we should have, well, then why aren't you doing this? You know what I mean? Like, you should be already rich and famous and, multi-million-dollar sports franchise on your belt. But no one knew anything. And that's the reality, right? So we were butting heads with people and brands. I made a brand cry during one of our big events. I won't say which one, and reported, I didn't know this, but we had a bit of a blowout in one of the offices right at the event. And I literally looked like, I don't care that you're having this problem. We should have solved this before. Apparently she went and cried in the bathroom. So who knows? Right. So that's how that started. Right. But we figured out, and then, COVID hit. How was I going to predict that? All of a sudden we thought we were good. We were sitting down with Red Bull and all this sort of stuff way back in the day. This was with the old Siggy. Siggy's was the first sports director for all of Red Bull back in the day. He did Red Bull cliff diving and everything like that. He was the guy, you know what I mean? And we were all, so within just a few years, we thought we had already hit it big. Right. And then boom, the world crumbles at our feet, and we're going, oh my God, what now? There's a puzzle for you. You know what I mean? So we quickly said, okay, we're going to become more online. We're going to go into esports. We're going to diversify. We're going to do this, this, and this. And we launched all these programs, right? Just prototyping all of them, right? And everyone said, oh, Greg, you're doing too much. I'm like, well, no, I'm not really doing too much. I'm diversifying because that doesn't work universally forever, So again, back to what you're talking about, you got to figure out what works. And now we're at a position where, okay, we do know what works. We've explored a lot. We've said, what about this? What about that? What about this strategy? What about that? Talking points. You're talking about how do you know if people even like your watch? Well, how do people know if you like a sport? You have to go and talk to them physically. There's no shortcut. There is no chat GPT that you just type in your question and it tells you everything. It just didn't work. So we ended up having to figure that out the hard way. But then once we came out of COVID, we're like, okay, we have a direction. We have a community around this. Now let's start formulating and tightening it up. And it's been step by step. And it's no different than the way you do it for athletes, right? When I'm coaching an athlete, I'm looking at this, and it's funny that they call it a corpus, a body, a corporation. That's literally synonymous from the Latin root word, right? Is how you build a company, a corporation of people, a company of people, and actually a skill, right? Because you can also look at a skill as a company of degrees of rotation across various axes of twisting, flipping, whatever it is, and you have to stack them bit by bit. I call it degree by degree. You know what I mean? And so I looked at it the same way. It says, okay, well, for the first few years, when an athlete comes into a gym, you don't say, line up, Johnny, and just do what I tell you. I'm going to walk you through how to be an Olympian. No, that's old school. That's 60s and 70s thinking. That's USSR. That's not the new updated science. And I come from a kinesiology background. I was going to go get my PhD actually in literally biophysics before all this. So some people think I'm a silly guy. I'm like, no, I know what's going on. And if you took the same principles from kinesiology that says, okay, you have to allow the first 10 minutes of every training, you need to explore. You need to let the athlete just go out there and maybe bump their knee and scrape their body a little bit, but they need to just go out there and have control over what they're doing. They need to figure out what they can and cannot do, push and pull your body a little bit within reason, obviously, but you need to do that. I was coming from a gymnastics system where that wasn't the case. It was, no, you don't you never explore outside of what the coach tells you. But then you get into the problem with the Olympics is having is that it's stale. It looks all the same because no one's exploring new ideas. They're just repeating the same boring ones from the 60s, right? And they still haven't got out of that because now it's kind of locked into policy. Well, that's the problem with the FIG for pretty much the future kind of thing, because that's what they've set their tone as. So this is where something I've learned is now, but I don't want to be like you probably don't want to own a watch company forever. You want to move on to other stuff. Well, we've built the FTA. It now works. I don't actually want to be part of the FTA. I now want to go build something else. So this was part of the puzzle that I had to figure out. Am I going to be a board member or sitting on this organizational committee forever, or am I going to go stuff myself in a tower so I can go build new things and yes, help the FTA where I can, but not be a slave to it? Because I see a lot of people get into businesses and they become slaves to it more than anything else, just as much as you're a slave to the government working for that 9-to-5 job. But even getting into a business, you can become a slave to that very business, which is very paradoxical in some ways, but I do see that happening. So I've been lucky enough to be able to switch my focus over the last year to say, no, I'm going to be an investment banker, essentially. I'm going to go build businesses and have fun with that. The FTA is one of my first businesses I've ever built, and right now it's valued at somewhere around $10 to $15 million, which is nice, and through, I think we're at $120 million economic spend in the community. We just raised about $500,000 of VIK for team development. Thank you, Jeremy, for joining on to that. And now we're raising actual formal capital to grease those wheels. But that's the first company, right? And that's not a bad first starting valuation for the first shot out the gate. But I know I don't want to sit there. I want to reposition myself personally to be able to now future grow in gosh knows whatever world. And that's my journey, the kind of matching sort of, I think, your journey a little bit, and because you have your hands in everything. Is there anything resonating with your journey that you're hearing that I'm expressing?
Yeah, 100%. I think that the thing that you really hit on is knowing what you want your life to be like, right? It's not just, I want a successful business, I want to make, $100 million. It's like, yeah, but like if you're working 18 hours a day on stuff you don't like, do you still want that business? And you, as a young person, you might say yes. But as a person with more experience, that if you don't, it's a quality of life. Even if you're working a lot, if you love what you're doing, that's different. If you're working a lot and you don't like what you're doing, then you're going to burn out. It's just how much time do you have? Eventually you will burn out. So like what you've done is, starting it, working really hard at it, and then developing a team. Like that's one thing that I missed when I was younger is I've always worked on teams, but I didn't understand the power of a team. And I didn't understand how leadership is more about building opportunities for other people to be successful than just yourself. Like the job of an entrepreneur isn't to run a company, it's to create jobs for other people to run the company. If you don't do that, you just work for the company you build. It's basically the same thing as a 9-to-5. You're the employee of the company that you build. If you're a business owner, you own the company that works for you. It's different. Like you have to build opportunities for other people, or you're just kind of a solopreneur. It's different than an entrepreneur, is doing everything by yourself. A lot of people start out there, but as you grow, you need the things that you're doing, especially things you don't want to do, replace yourself with other people that want to do those things. Because another quote I heard from a person, I was at an event, they were speaking, they said, everything on your to-do list that you hate to do, somebody would love to do it. And I was like, man, that really reprogrammed the way I thought about things. Because everybody has those things on their to-do list. They're like, I'll get to it later, because you really don't want to do it. That's why you're procrastinating on it, because you kind of don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where it's like, okay, well, who can I find that loves doing this task? And like they'd be like excited to do it. And so that's how I reframe it for myself, is like every time I'm like, I'll get to that. I'm like, okay, you're skipping this thing that needs to be done because you don't like to do it. Find somebody that likes to do it, and that's a great way to start building a collaboration, a community that's helping you achieve your goal.
Well, I like that train of thought, and you're bang on, and it's something I kind of learned as well. Like obviously, I've had a lot of support being adopted into a good family, not to an abusive one. I had a brother that was Canadian that didn't beat me up, which he had every right to, as intruding on his solo relationship with my parents and all that. But I got very lucky in that sort of stuff. So I've always kind of been aware of it. But yes, going through this process, you realize it takes a village, as they colloquially say. And you want it to take a village. And I really like what you said there, that building a business is about building opportunities for other people. And the first few years when I was trying to sell to all these trampoline parks to do events, and I was trying to sell these brands to sponsor athletes and all this sort of stuff, I went in a completely the opposite way. And I've obviously switched that around recently. But I came in saying, yeah, you're gonna give me $2,500, and I'm gonna, I'll just do that, whatever. But give me money. And it literally, and I didn't say just like that, but that was the mentality. I was going in, and I watch a lot of the kids doing it. So I'm like, I got you. I'm catching you guys doing this. I know exactly what's going on. And I want them to learn from my mistakes that no, guys, the first thing you should do if you're building your business is figure out and you really bring in hit the nail on the head there. Figure out what you actually want to do in life first. Life is shorter than you think it is. I promise you it is. And all of a sudden you're going to end up being mid-30s and going, do I actually like this position? It might be a cool business. It might be flashy. And you might be able to say, oh, I built this or built that, and everyone loves it. And viral videos. But do you actually genuinely like doing it to the point where if you were to literally wipe all that away and had to restart from zero, which many people did during COVID, right? Would you redo that exact same thing again? Yes or no? Right. And that's, I think, a question a lot of entrepreneurs don't ask at the beginning. They ask when they're halfway through and they're already locked in, like you said, to that 9-to-5 solo entrepreneur, whatever, kind of a situation. But now all of a sudden they're a slave. But now, even worse, they have now creditors, i.e. investors, and people that now say, well, yeah, I don't care what your problem is, buddy. You told me you were going to deliver this. You told me this. And I've now made my lifestyle based on what you said. So now you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. You know what I mean? And a lot of people don't think that far ahead. They just start, oh my God, influencer did this. I'm just going to quickly get a camera for Christmas, and I'm just going to now tell everyone I'm an influencer. But a year goes by and they go, I don't actually like it. Now all of a sudden they're undoing it. Now they're starting again from zero. If you had just thought about this right at the beginning a little bit more, even for an extra couple of weeks, and didn't just jump at the first TikTok shop affiliate program that came across your thing, and you really thought, okay, in 50 years, where do I want to be? What's that vision of something I'm leaving on the planet, that's way beyond the money and way beyond the fame? It's like an actual value, right? Something that's really going to help the world in some way, or a small part of the world. You're not going to fix the world, but what is that? And if you start there, I think then it's easier to be happy with what you're doing. B, it's easier to then pivot as you go, and C, back to your point as well, it's then easier to get people on board that want to help bring that vision to life, that then will do the things that ultimately you don't want to do all the time, right? But you're not pawning it off onto a sucker. You're finding, and I loved how you said that, find someone that really does want to do that. There are sales guys out there that are just hungry for sales. They love that thrill of that chase. There's people that love the creative design of building websites. There's people that love the logistical nightmare of trying to host an X Games X Fest with Akon. You know what I mean? And stuff like that. And it's about putting the right people in the right seats that then make the whole thing grow bigger and bigger. I loved what you're saying. I'm with you 100%.
Yep, definitely, man. It's super exciting. Yeah, I think it does take a special type of person that really, really enjoys the difficulties that come with entrepreneurship. And I think it's a worthy pursuit. I used to think everybody should be an entrepreneur, like back in the day, and I kind of do realize that everybody might not be built for entrepreneurship. I maybe that's a little everybody might not agree with that statement, but I do think that some people enjoy the security of not necessarily 9-to-5, and it doesn't have to be a 9-to-5, but you might be a person who works on social media content for yourself and others. It might be something like that. You might not be building a company that's going to change the world, like you said. You might just find comfort in supporting other people. That might be the type of person you are, and I think that's okay. And I think people need to understand the type of person they are and what they like to do, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be Mr. Beast, the person that films for Mr. Beast loves filming and he's super successful at it. You know, that's okay. You can play a supporting role in somebody else's dream that fits your dream. Your dream might be to be an amazing videographer and you need amazing people to videos, you know? So like you don't have to be that leading person. I think I didn't necessarily realize this younger. I was like, oh, you have to be, it's all you, lone wolf, go do it, you know? But I think the more that I grow and see that nothing is truly, nothing great is truly done alone. Like, I don't think anybody accomplishes anything of substantial magnitude alone. It might look like it. They might be the lead singer of the band, but there's other people playing other instruments. without the other people in the band, there's no music. There's just one person singing on a microphone. You know what I mean? So it's a group effort no matter what you're doing, no matter what's being done. Mr. Beast, he's the lead singer of his company, but there's a million other people that are orchestrating and organizing and making it happen. And I think that's why I kind of like people like Mr. Beast who share their stories, share their difficulty, and say, hey, I have 100 people that are helping me do this. This isn't just me. Because I think in olden times, you know, you always just saw the highlight, you know, you never really saw behind the scenes because that just wasn't the world we lived in. Now you really can find, you know, the behind the scenes. You can find these long form podcasts like you're doing. Thank you for doing this. That really share the story, share the background, share the troubles. And I think that anybody who wants to achieve the magnitude of success of somebody, they're like, I want to be like that person. Watch all their podcasts. watch them tell the story of how they got to where they are. Don't just watch their highlight reel of where they are. Like, that's the thing. I think you need to watch, like, study the person, study their journey, study what got them there. And maybe you can learn on how to get there maybe faster than they did if you can learn from them. But you need to learn the process that they had to take to be successful, or you're just going to be living in this world of illusions, right? Illusions and delusion. Like, those are the things that'll get you in trouble, is like when you're like, man, why isn't this happening faster for me? You might just think like there's something wrong with you, when in reality, you're on the right pace. You're actually where you're supposed to be on the journey to your success. But just because it's not happening fast doesn't mean you're not doing it correctly. You know, you have to go through the process. And I like to use a lot of metaphors in my life and my vision and my understanding. And one I always come back to is like, as an entrepreneur, you're kind of like a farmer. You're really planting seeds and watching them grow. And when you plant a seed, like say you're growing a tree, you're planting a seed, you're like, tree, grow faster. How silly does that sound, right? You can't make a tree go faster. It has to grow at the time it takes a tree to grow. And that's the same thing as growing a business. You have to understand, you have to water it, take care of it, grow it, and keep doing that until you give it the opportunity to grow. And whenever I'm trying to overreact and go super fast and this should be happening better, faster, stronger, I kind of take myself back to that. It's like, you're growing a tree. How are you going to yell at it and tell it to grow faster? That doesn't make any sense, you know? So kind of like reining myself in is like, this is the process that things take. And, you know, being mindful of that the whole journey through.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I like your analogy there. Yeah, yelling at a tree or anything like that. Go faster. With that one from the movie, ball, why don't you just go in your damn hole?
Yeah.
Stupid ball. I can't remember.
Happy Gilmore, maybe?
Yeah, Happy Gilmore. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, of course it's not going to work. You know, there's so many market forces at play that a lot of also entrepreneurs don't see that part too, right? They, again, kind of back to your thing about control and everyone thinking, I have to be in control, I have to be the leader. But in reality, you don't want to be the leader if it's big enough. You know what I mean? Because if it's small, of course you'll be the leader, but if it's big, then other people are going to have to come in. And a lot of things I tell a bunch of the athletes and stuff like that, it always stops them in their tracks a little bit because they never really think about it so much. But you say, okay, well, I'm going to start a business over here. We'll just use Mr. Beast now as an example, since we've been going with that. Well, okay, Mr. Beast, he's the leader. Well, okay, but Mr. philanthropies, he needs a camera guy, he needs this person, he needs an insurance company, he needs a place to go, he needs a travel agent, accountant, all these things. Boom, boom. He's probably got 100 people somehow working for him in some way or shape, all doing pieces. But then wait, it gets bigger than that, because then hold on, you couldn't even have a camera guy unless someone invented the camera. Well, now, are you going to give royalties to that person? And well, that person wouldn't have been able to invent the camera unless mom and dad invented that person. And if mom and dad weren't invented, and the markets weren't doing this, and World War I and II didn't happen exactly this way, this person here wouldn't do this. And all of a sudden, this huge trickle down effect, where all of a sudden, the leader, that's a hard notion to even have when you look at it this way. It's just another cog in the wheel of evolution of technology or capitalism or whatever it is. And very quickly you realize you can't be the leader, because where you think you're leading one area, someone else is leading you in a different area, right? And we're not even getting into free will and all that sort of stuff. That's a whole nother rabbit hole. We'll get into that one day. But just looking at the sheer amount of people that have to come together to create the companies, that then create the companies, that then created your ability to even try to create a company, it's massive. So I love the idea of what you're saying. You don't need to be the leader of everything. You can play a supporting role. You as a supporting role is a leader to somebody else, and vice versa. And this is something I've learned about, and recently kind of coming really to grips with, is I don't want to be the leader of the FTA. I want to be in my tower, doing my little tinkering and messing around. And now I'm actually investing in companies where I'm not the leader of the company anymore. I'm stacking the deck and saying, I'll happily take 20% equity. I'll take 10%. I'll take 5%. Hey, I'll just connect you guys, but give me some free goodwill in the future, and maybe you'll help me out somewhere down the line. I don't care. It's all good, guys. We're all here together, and I'm taking a purposeful minority stake in all these different companies now that I'm developing, simply because I'm coming to the realization that you were expressing right there. But that allows me to then be actually freer, and actually now paradoxically control my life more and be back in control as we get back to the beginning of that whole sort of segment. So it's kind of funny how that sort of works out. And I don't think there's a book that can teach you that, because there's not a book that's going to live it for you. It's just going to tell you what this person did, and now you got to go through it. And there's no other way besides actually going through the bumps and scrapes of trying to do your first quad back to make you realize actually how to do it, so you can hopefully pass that information down to the next generation.
Yeah, I love what you said about story. Like, I have this other little tool that I created or learned from somebody. I kind of forget these days, where I take my life from the beginning, I write it up to where I am, and then I write it like going forward. Like, how do you want your story to play out? Like, if your life was a movie, like, how do you want it to play out? And that kind of gives you framing. It gives you like a looking at your life from the outside, looking in a little bit of like, how do you want it to play out? And there's even people that go deeper. And Tim Ferriss is one of my guys. I really like him and his framing of things. And he was like, think about what you want people to say at your funeral. Like everybody eventually is going to die. Like, what would you like to be said about you at your funeral? And that really shows you what you find is important in your life and how you want to live your life and the impact you want to have on other people, right? Because everybody like that's going to be there is going to be people you had an impact on their lives, and they want to kind of memorialize you and honor you. And like, how do you want that to be? And that can kind of inform you on how you should be living your life, right? If you want people to be like, he was a great person, he was so awesome, like, then you should probably be great to other people. You should be nice to other people, be generous to other people, things of that nature. And I think like that informs the bigger story of our existence, is how do we want to be remembered?
I'm with you. And it comes down to creating value. And I hate this, this whole fight that people have against capitalism, like it's some kind of disease or something, or you're some greedy prick for wanting to go out there and build something. And yeah, I agree that they're bad entrepreneurs are not out for the right reasons. But if you're in it to create value for others and yourself, of course, right? You want to build a life that you enjoy. But I think people generally like to see other people happy, and see that, there's some joy that they could help bring to their life. That's why parents want to have kids. If you boil it down and beyond all this other stuff, They want to be able to know that they're providing value to amoeba that is you, and be able to say, I was able to help that amoeba be able to have some kind of basic life, and that makes me feel good for making you feel good. I think there's the very thing, and I think capitalism is nothing more than that sort of parenting, sort of manifesting itself in sort of just a different form, we'll say. So I
Yep.
think really, as kids get into potentially the entrepreneurial route one way or another, and the definition of entrepreneur, who knows what that means, right? But it's about creating value, and it's about
Yep.
creating value for other people. And if you can figure out what that value could be or might be, or at least be open to the idea that that is really the base of what is happening, then the marketing and the sales strategy and this all kind of gets stacked on that platform. And if
Yep.
this platform is not good, then it's like an athlete that said, I think I'm going to hook my next quad backflip, but they haven't done their rope climbs, they haven't done their flexibility, they whatever, they're coming in half drunk from whatever Friday night, whatever, on training the next Saturday morning. No, that's not a good way to build your foundation. Figure out, though, that one thing before you start figuring all that out is, what value do you want to leave on the planet? From there, I think the rest, you'll attract that kind of other people with a similar mind state, and then it will build itself.
Yep. Yeah, I think the key that you hit on is value. I didn't understand that when I first started entrepreneurship, is like, no matter what you're doing, you're creating value for others. That's just the only way it works. If people don't find what you're doing valuable, then there is no capitalism. There is no transaction there, because they're just going to ignore what you're doing because they don't find it valuable. So really thinking about, how is what I'm doing valuable to other people, like you mentioned, that is it. That's the key. What value are you providing? And really understanding that, you have to get into the mind of the people that you're serving. Because I think, for me, entrepreneurship is service. Like, you're really serving your market as much and as great as you can. Obviously, you have to do that sustainably. So you can't just give away all your money, or you're just gonna, not be able to do what you're doing anymore, because you're gonna run out. So you have to have some kind of transaction that creates value for your client, your customer, and yourself, which will enable you to do what you're doing sustainably. That is what building a business is about, is making it sustainable for you to keep providing value to the people that you're serving. And I think that's what people miss. People that aren't entrepreneurs, that don't like entrepreneurship, or think building a business is like a self-serving thing, they have never tried to start a business. I can tell you that, because you'll find out very quickly that it's not about you. Nobody actually, I don't want to say nobody cares about you, but like, you have to lead with value. If you lead with me, this is what I want, they're like, yeah, I want something too. See you later. That's not going to win you any friends. It's not going to win you any fans. It's not going to win you any customers. If you lead with like, hey, I solved this problem that you have, then they're like, oh, how'd you do that? I want to hear more. That's the only way. That's creating value to help them solve the problems that they're having. And that goes from a